For all you elk hunters out there, chasing turkeys is basically the same thing. I know the reaction you just gave me, but don't knock it till you try it, and don't try it without OnX. The Hunt app will not only help you find new areas on public ground, but I use it to find out landowner info to get permission on private ground that I see birds on as well. OnX Hunt has a special offer for you. Use code CAL to receive 20% off your membership at onxmaps.com/hunt and find more birds this spring.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
From MeatEater's World News Headquarters in Bozeman, Montana, this is Cal's Weekend Review presented by Steel. Steel products are available only at authorized dealers. For more, go to steeldealers.com. Now, here's your host, Ryan Cal Callahan.
A trapper in northern Minnesota made national news last week for going above and beyond to save an animal that had been caught in one of his traps. This good-hearted individual had snagged a pine marten in a set meant for bobcats. A set is, like your, if you were somebody who was out there fishing with a bobber and a worm, that would be your set, okay? When you're a trapper, a trap that is baited and ready to rock is a set. You're welcome. Pine marten seasons had already ended, so he called the Minnesota DNR to report the incidental take. But according to Conservation Officer Nicholas Prachar, give me a call. Let me know how to pronounce that. We'll just call him DNR Officer Nick. The man was almost in tears on the phone because he said he didn't want the animal to die. Moments later, the man said he saw the marten's eyes flutter and he hung up. He called back to report that he'd revived the marten using the animal version of CPR. He put his lips on the animal's nose and blew into it, which miraculously worked. Video taken by the trapper's wife confirmed the sequence of events, and game wardens arrived to find a very alive and very angry pine marten pinballing around the trapper's ATV. The animal was released back into the woods shortly thereafter, and he'll have quite a story to tell at his next dinner party. Animal CPR is a very real thing, according to the American Red Cross. If you ever discover that your dog or other animal isn't breathing and doesn't have a heartbeat, the organization recommends performing 30 chest compressions at a rate of 100 per minute. After that, brush your teeth. Give the animal 2 rescue breaths by closing its mouth and blowing into its nose until you see the chest rise. Like if you got a naughty dog and you clamp its jaw shut, well, do that gently and blow into its nostrils. This Minnesota trapper has so far declined to talk about the experience to the media, but don't go thinking this is a one-off late Christmas miracle. Lots of stories in the waterfowl world of Labradors, Chessies, and swamp collies being wet-kissed back to life. Those hunters not only get their buddies back after a really scary moment, but they also had the best excuse for any dog mistakes forever. Well, you can't be too hard on old Gus. He's short a few brain cells. I ever tell you about the time he drowned? This week, we've got HPAI, ice floats, Snort report, and Kevlar, but first I'm going to tell you about my week. And my week was a lot of fun. First, big thanks to the boys. Taylor Luan and Will Compton of Bussin' with the Boys for coming out to duck hunt here in Montana. It's only because of you two we got a midweek hunt in with old Snort. She is a happy girl after a morning of mixed water and field retrieves. She did pretty darn well, too, considering this was our first duck hunt of the year. Kills me to say that. You'll, of course, be able to watch some of the fun on an upcoming Meat Eater podcast and some field footage on the Meat Eater YouTube channel. One big issue Snort and I are having is my old whistle, which is the only whistle Snort has ever been around, is really starting to fail. It's starting to stick and get this high-pitched scream and can't hear it. But Snort doesn't know any other whistle, so the new whistle I have, which is a different pitch, is something that's very easy for her to ignore. So there's been a little bit of frustration there. I've been out practicing with her, but in the heat of the moment, of that duck action, that hard-headed little girl tends to forget. But we didn't have any lost ducks, and no humans had to retrieve anything. So it was pretty darn good. Then, for more fun, we headed east to the family farm, which is very small, but at times loads up with geese. We had a super fun, very relaxing day in the sun on Saturday, with no shortage of goose killing opportunities. I managed to get a nice double with the side-by-side 20 gauge using 3-inch bismuth number 5s, the federal type, and dumped those big honkers like a sack of bricks. A Led Zeppelin, if you will. Another nice couple of retrieves by Snort, and I realized she could use some off-season weight training. Those big honkers are tough on a little dog. Saturday was so good, I invited Dr. Randall Williams out. His arrival coincided with an unsuspected storm front, which forced a bunch of birds out, as in out of the state, and made the wind blow from all the wrong directions. I was trying to be a good host and let Randall get the shot opportunities that did present themselves, but in the end, we only came away with one goose, a very tiny goose, something I would call a cackling goose. There are 4 subspecies of cackling goose, which for those of you who are not birders or not goose hunters, these are just small geese, and comparatively rare to the enormous numbers of Canada geese. According to Ducks Unlimited, a 2007 population study estimated only 74,000 taverners geese, which is what I kind of figured this one is. But outside of that, it's also just a tiny goose. The one Randall shot, like I said, is more than likely a taverners, which is not quite the tiniest of the tiny geese, and he shot this goose with a 10-gauge shotgun, which is the largest gauge shotgun a hunter can use. Just had to point that out. Don't worry, the tiny geese have seen steady population increases along with the Canada geese, which are riding a 1,500% population increase over the last 40 years. Moving on to the pandemic desk. The bird flu epidemic isn't as serious as last year, but it's still taking a toll on some waterfowl populations. Listener Mike from Wisconsin sent me a story from his neck of the woods about a quarry near Green Bay that was shut down due to a bird flu outbreak. Several dead geese were found recently at Duck Creek Quarry, and testing confirmed that they died of highly pathogenic avian influenza. The quarry and surrounding trails will be closed to public access until 5 days pass with no sick or dead birds. There have been about 8,600 reported cases of bird flu in wild birds since the outbreak began in January of 2022. According to the USDA, there were only 275 cases reported in December of 2023, and the prevalence of the disease has decreased since its peak in 2022. That's good news for both duck hunters and chicken farmers, but bird flu isn't going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, Alaska made history recently when wildlife officials confirmed that a polar bear had died of the disease for the first time ever. The bear was found in October on Alaska's North Slope. While polar bears feed mostly on seals, wildlife officials believe the bear probably got the flu by eating a dead bird, which is often how non-avian critters end up with the illness. Along with the polar bear, 3 foxes, a black bear, and a brown bear have died from avian influenza in Alaska in the past 2 years. Other areas have seen dead skunks, raccoons, mountain lions, squirrels, seals, and other animals. Several black and brown bears have died of the disease, so it was really only a matter of time before it claimed one of Coca-Cola's mascots. But this polar bear story illustrates the differences between this outbreak and the one in 2014 and 2015. Those years saw millions of dead chickens and turkeys, but other species didn't often make the news. This time around, we're seeing far more dead wild birds and mammals, which makes it more difficult to stamp out the disease. It's unfortunate to wipe out an entire chicken farm, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a relatively simple process. It's far more challenging to address a disease in wild populations, but that's exactly what wildlife officials are trying to do. If you thought it was tough to convince Americans to get vaccinated for COVID, just try convincing an 800-pound carnivore to take the jab. You'll need more than a catchy jingle and the help of late-night talk show hosts. There isn't a vaccine for bird flu, but you get the point. When a disease jumps to wild populations, it's almost impossible to contain. And speaking of polar bears, the fuzzy Arctic mammals may contain the secret to the next breakthrough in winter clothing. Thanks to listener Jim Lane for sending us this story. Chinese scientists created a material modeled after polar bear fur, and they found that it's warmer and less bulky than down and wool jackets. Each strand of polar bear fur contains pockets of air that trap heat and prevent it from escaping. But those pockets are also surrounded by a dense outer shell that gives the hair structure and makes it durable. These scientists developed a synthetic material called encapsulated aerogel fiber that works on the similar principle. They knitted a sweater out of this material and tested it against a down jacket, a wool sweater, and a long-sleeved cotton top. Even though the polar bear sweater was only 1/5 as thick as the down jacket, it had the best insulation of all 4 fabrics. It also maintained its heat-trapping properties even after being stretched, washed, and dyed. It's a long way from being mass-produced, but if any of you folks at First Light are listening, you may want to jump on this one. Australian mountaineer George Finch was nearly laughed off the mountain when he showed up in one of the first down jackets, but his design became the basis for some of the warmest clothing ever produced. Maybe it's time for the next advancement, and we'll be able to thank polar bears without having to deprive them of their fur. For all you elk hunters out there, chasing turkeys is basically the same thing. I know the reaction you just gave me, but don't knock it till you try it, and don't try it without OnX. The Hunt app will not only help you find new areas on public ground, but I use it to find out landowner info to get permission on private ground that I see birds on as well. OnX Hunt has a special offer for you. Use code CAL to receive 20% off your membership at onxmaps.com/hunt and find more birds this spring.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater.
We've all seen plenty of gadgets and fads come and go, but here's one product that stood the test of time: Seafoam Motor Treatment. Lots of hunters and anglers know that Seafoam helps engines run better and last longer. It's really simple. When you pour it in your gas tank, Seafoam cleans harmful fuel deposits that cause engine problems. I'm talking common stuff like hard starts, rough engine performance, or lost fuel economy. Seafoam is an easy way to prevent or overcome these problems. Just pour a can in your gas tank and let it clean your fuel system. You probably know someone who has used a can of Seafoam to get their truck or boat going again. I guarantee you've listened to them because I use it regularly. People everywhere rely on Seafoam to keep their trucks, boats, and small engines running the way they should the entire season. Help your engine run better and last longer. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more. Moving on to the anti-hunter desk. An environmental organization in British Columbia has bought the commercial hunting rights to 18,000 square kilometers of the Great Bear Rainforest on the province's north and central coast. That represents about a quarter of the entire forest and makes the group the largest hunting tenure holder in British Columbia, with control of more than 56,000 square kilometers. The group is called the Rain Coast Conservation Foundation, and they've been buying these hunting tenures since 2005. A hunting tenure in BC is a lot like a guiding lease here in the US. An outfitter or guide purchases the exclusive right to hunt on a specific piece of property, and no one else can guide clients in that area. The Rain Coast Conservation Foundation purchases these tenures, but instead of using them to guide hunters, they either go unused or they use them for ecotourism and wildlife watching. Canadian law does include some requirements for how these hunting tenures must be used, but they don't require the guide or hunters to actually kill anything. The Rainforest Conservation Foundation takes advantage of this loophole, and they aren't shy about it. We are required to do hunts in order to maintain these territories at this point, one of the group's officials told the CBC. We've been very unsuccessful at those hunts, and so the harvest rate has gone down to 0 in those properties. We just have very, very poor hunters, he said. Actual hunters and outfitters in Canada aren't too happy about this, as you can imagine. While grizzly hunting was banned in the province in 2017, hunters can still pursue all kinds of game in one of the most rugged, beautiful places on Earth. But with commercial hunting rights in these areas controlled by what are essentially animal rights activists, their options are limited. The group, Hunters for BC, told the CBC that the law should change to compel the owners of hunting tenures to actually hunt, not just go through the motions and sign a few pieces of paper. They also pointed out that the threat to game species doesn't come from hunters. It comes from habitat loss and degradation. If anything, barring actual hunters from these areas will make this problem worse because fewer people will know or care about these landscapes. Hunters are great conservationists not because they're better than other people. They want to preserve the habitats and species they pursue because they love the experience and fall in love with those places. They don't want to see those places disappear, and so they fight to protect them. Buying up hunting rights doesn't do anything to improve habitat or encourage more people to get involved in conservation. Thanks to listener Cale Patterson for sending us that story. If you live in BC or ever plan to hunt there, get on the phone with the provincial government. They need to see how much money they're losing by keeping hunters off these areas. That's not the best reason to care about this issue, but sometimes it's the only language our elected officials understand. Moving on to the ice fishing desk. 'Tis the season for ice fishing, which means 'tis the season for ice fishing accidents. Up in Minnesota, one angler died and several others had to be rescued after an ice fishing vehicle known as a bomber crashed through the ice. The incident occurred on the Lake of the Woods. The sheriff's office reported that a Bombardier-tracked vehicle crashed through the ice carrying 8 passengers. These vehicles look like a cross between a snowmobile and a Beetle. They have tracks on the back and skis on the front, and they also have curved, covered tops with round, submarine-like windows. Anyway, one of these things broke through 12 inches of ice while heading to an ice fishing spot near Flag Island. The driver began assisting passengers out of the vehicle until, according to the sheriff's office, the cold water prohibited their continued efforts. One man tragically remained in the vehicle, a 78-year-old named John Frey of Wisconsin. His body was recovered below the surface in about 10 feet of water, and investigation is ongoing. Another ice fishing accident turned fatal last month, this one in the Wisconsin town of Westcott. Details are scarce at this time, but local media reports that a man went fishing on Lulu Lake on Christmas Day but did not return home. He was reported missing around 4:30 p.m. on that day by concerned family members, and officials found a hole in the ice next to his fishing gear. The search was called off that night due to the dark and restarted Monday morning. His car was found near the boat ramp and his body was eventually recovered in the lake. His name has not been released, but officials did say he was 78 years old. Yet another ice fishing accident took place last week in Minnesota, though fortunately no one died. 122 anglers were stranded on an ice floe after it broke away from the shoreline on Upper Red Lake in Beltrami County. By the time someone reached the 911 operator, the floe had drifted over 30 feet from shore, according to a statement by the Beltrami County Sheriff's Office. No one fell in until someone tried to ferry people back to shore in a canoe. 4 people got a free ice bath for their efforts, but all of them were rescued and survived. The remaining 118 people were rescued by emergency personnel, but it took 2.5 hours to complete the task. It's important for everybody to know here that this isn't the first time ice anglers have had to be rescued from this lake. The Beltrami County Sheriff's Office says that anglers have been stranded 3 times since December 17th. The sheriff's Facebook page is filled with stories about people getting stranded or breaking through the ice in their ATVs, and one person even broke through in an airplane. Folks like getting out on the ice with their families over the holidays, but unseasonably warm weather means the conditions are far more dangerous than in years past. A Cal's Week in Review listener wrote in to tell me that there might be another reason this lake is seeing more accidents than usual. Eric Nelson explained that the sheriff's office put a ban on motorized vehicle traffic on the Upper Red Lake until the ice is thick enough to be safe, but this ban does not apply to the resort owners who allow their guests to ice fish. Sheriff Jason Riggs says resort operators and guide services have permission to operate vehicles on the ice for the wellness and well-being of their customers, but private anglers still aren't allowed to use motorized vehicles. The sheriff says that the resorts often act as first responders, so it makes sense to allow them to keep using ATVs. But Eric points out that these resort owners are partly to blame for this year's accidents, since they're the ones who have told their guests where it's safe and where it's not. Eric says they sometimes don't monitor conditions closely enough, which has led to dangerous conditions and, ultimately, the vehicle ban. Whatever the case may be, any ice angler can determine for themselves whether a section is safe to walk across. Carry an ice pick, rope, ice chisel, tape measure, spud bar, and check the ice thickness regularly. And be aware that conditions can change quickly. Ice can be 12 inches thick in one spot and only a few inches thick 6 feet away. 4 inches of clear, new ice can support ice fishing activities on foot, while you need at least 5 inches to support an ATV. But old ice can be significantly weaker than new ice, and you don't always know how recently the ice has formed. To be safe, you should look for at least 8 inches to go fishing on foot and 10 inches to drive out in an ATV. One piece of safety equipment for you folks who are prone to getting stranded on ice floes, which is an every year event. Looking at you, Wisconsin. You know those fully contained battery-operated trolling motors? That's what you need to carry with you. That way when the slab breaks off, it's like that Charlie Barron's joke, right? That slab breaks off, you can just put your trolling motor on the edge of the ice, drive everybody back to shore. Huh? Think about it. Moving on to the law enforcement desk, 2 men are facing charges for reckless endangerment after they fired 45 rounds at 2 game wardens and claimed to be hunting coyotes. The Columbus Dispatch reports that the incident occurred in Pike County, Pennsylvania, and involved a man from Ohio and another from Brooklyn, New York. It was the opening day of deer rifle season, and the game wardens were speaking with another hunter when they began to hear bullets whizzing past their heads. They took cover behind their vehicles, and one of the wardens was able to flip his siren on. The shooting immediately stopped, and they went to investigate. They found the 2 men decked out for guerrilla warfare. One was wearing body armor, an orange hat, and carried a handgun. The other was wearing a ballistic helmet, an orange vest, and carrying an AK-47 rifle. They said they were new hunters and had been firing at movement through the trees, assuming they were shooting at coyotes. They emptied both magazines at the game wardens, 15 rounds from the handgun and 30 from the rifle. They somehow missed hitting either law enforcement officer, but they're still facing multiple charges, including recklessly endangering another person, discharging a firearm at random, using a semi-automatic rifle or pistol, and multiple hunting violations. The man wearing the body armor said he decided to do so because he was worried about being shot by another hunter. How's that for some irony?
It's like rain.
Moving on to the mail desk. Listener James Eaker wrote in to tell me about a quirky North Carolina law that rescinds all animal cruelty restrictions against possums for 5 days each year. Known as the Possum Purge, in reference to the 2013 movie The Purge, this bill does exactly that. Quote, no state or local statutes, rules, regulations, or ordinances related to the capture, captivity, treatment, or release of wildlife shall apply to the Virginia opossum between December 29 and January 2nd. It was passed by large majorities in the House and Senate in 2015 and signed by then-Governor Pat McCrory. At this point, you're probably asking yourself, what do North Carolinians have against possums? Possums may look like giant rats, but they're a native species to North America, and they serve important ecological functions. Why would the North Carolina legislature allow human residents to mistreat possums for 5 days around the new year? As with most unusual laws, this one was passed to serve a small, specific group of people. The owner of a convenience store in Brasstown, North Carolina, longtime listeners will remember this one, started a New Year's tradition in 1990 called the Possum Drop. It was like the Times Square ball drop, but instead of gathering to watch a giant disco ball, the residents of Brasstown gathered to watch a possum slowly lowered in a transparent glass box. If you don't believe me, there's plenty of footage online you can watch. Animal rights groups were none too happy about this event, so they filed a lawsuit. In response, the state legislature passed the Possum Purge Law to protect the possum drop organizer, a man named Clay Logan. Ironically, just a few years later, Logan said he'd no longer be moving forward with the tradition, and the possum drop is no more. But that law is still in the books. For 5 days every year, North Carolina residents don't have to adhere to any trapping or cruelty laws as they relate to Virginia possums. We've covered a lot of bad bills on this podcast, but this one is ridiculous. I haven't seen any reports of widespread possum targeting in the Tar Heel State, and 5 days probably isn't enough time to harm the general possum population anyway. But for the legislature to supersede the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission just to protect a silly tradition in a single town is the worst kind of ecology by legislation. It's not that bad when compared to the hunting restrictions and trapping bans we're fighting in other states, but it still doesn't set a great precedent. Let's keep wildlife regulations in the hands of the biologists and let our politicians handle the politics. That's all I got for you this week. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to write in to ASKCAL, that's AskCal, at themeateater.com, and let me know what's going on in your neck of the woods. On top of that, go to www.steeldealers.com, find a local knowledgeable steel dealer near you. They'll get you set up with what you need, and they won't try to send you home with what you don't. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next week.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. Simply pour a can in your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. Pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more. That's seafoamworks.com to learn more.